I'm John Beaudin. Here's our interview with Gil Moore of Triumph, the whole thing. Gil Moore is a guy I wanted to talk to for quite a few years. I've interviewed Rick Emmett like 7 or 8 times. Just in the last year, we talked to Mike Levine twice. But Gil, we didn't have him. And there's only 3 guys in this band, or there were. They're not really a band anymore. Have you seen the documentary? It's quite good. I gotta say, I simply love talking to this guy. Here's our interview in its entirety. This is Rock History Canada. Well, let's talk about let's continue with that. I'm always curious about family dynamics, and Gil, as you can understand, half the people I talk to, I'm 62. Half the people I talk to have at least 10 years on me. Been in radio 39 years, so I've interviewed freaking everybody in Canada and a lot in the US and Europe. But only half of them, and I'm being generous when I say that, say, did the parents get it? Obviously, your parents did, or your dad did. But how was that as a kid growing up, being a rocker and a drummer? I know I've got one. He's 18. How was that for you? How did the family take that?
Well, when you're a kid, at least if you were me, you take a lot of things for granted, and you don't realize until you're older that you did. So, for example, in my neighborhood, my parents would let my bands practice in our house. None of the other parents would, but my parents would allow it. I can remember when we got a keyboard player, and of course, it's funny when you say you got a keyboard player. Yeah, but when we started for instruments, so your keyboard player meant that his parents had a piano in their house. So the only way we could practice, my mom was a pianist, and she had a beautiful Heinzman piano in her living room. And she said, well, you can practice in the living room. You got to be careful. When I look back on that, I'm like, my parents let my band practice in the living room. Are you kidding me? Who would allow that? They had a rule about me practicing drums, because when I got hooked on drums, it was every single day of my life. And it was nonstop noise, of course, coming from our basement. And they had a rule that I could practice from when I came home from school until dinner. And then I could go right back after dinner and start up again. They would go into our den, which was at the rear part of the house, turn the TV up to warp 11 and shut the door. And it was lights out at 8:30. 8:30, I had to stop playing drums. So I was playing drums from, I get home from school about, I think, 3:30, 3:45. I'd be playing right through till 8:30 every single day. And on the weekends, it was kind of Katie bar the door. I could do whatever I wanted on the weekends. So, they were incredibly understanding and supportive beyond anything you can imagine. But as I said, I kind of thought, okay, this is how it is. You just take it for granted in a way. I mean, you do get to see the other parents that are not the same way, but are you really grateful at that young age? Not as grateful as when you're older. It's like hockey practice. I remember when my dad passed away and I was at the hospital, and the first words that came out of my mouth to the nurse was, he took me to hockey practice at 5 a.m. I don't know where that thought comes from, but if you can just imagine, he would get up and he would drive me, he would drive the neighborhood kids, and then to be other fathers, of course, who wouldn't get up at 5 a.m, who wouldn't drive the neighborhood kids. So as time goes on, you just have more and more respect and more and more, thankful. I have a lot of kids in my school that have good parents, and I have a lot that have poor parents. And I always, whenever I'm doing mentor sessions with the younger kids that have problems at home and so on, I say, look, you don't get to pick your parents. It's something that happens to you in life. So not everybody gets a great, they get somebody's going to get the short straw, at a certain point. And that's unfortunate, because, all kids deserve to have a shot, and not every kid does.
For you, when you were in your parents' house, I'm curious, what were the songs that you were practicing? What were the ones that you were trying to get down? Because obviously you had your heroes too.
Well, it was so limited. Like when you think back, pre-internet, pre-everything, So, it kind of started with, the Animals, the Beatles, Jerry and the Pacemakers, the British Invasion, as I'll call it, the Yardbirds, those bands. Very soon thereafter, I actually migrated into the blues artists that actually influenced many of those bands, that influenced the Yardbirds, that influenced, of course, Led Zeppelin afterwards, that influenced Eric Clapton, that influenced the Rolling Stones. And so that was a real change up for me getting into those bands. But at the same time, which seems totally incongruous, I was influenced by military drumming. And I was very, very lucky that I met Skip Prokop. I'll never forget, the drummer from Lighthouse. And Skip gave me a lesson that changed my life. One lesson, 20 minutes, changed my life.
What did he do?
Sorry?
What did he, like, what was the magic in 20 minutes?
In 20 minutes, he talked to me about how to improve your sticking and your speed and your power. And I think a lot of what goes wrong with young drummers is there's a sort of a lollygag way to do things, and then there's the hard way to do things. So the first thing he said to me, he says, "Do you have a practice pad?" I said, "Well, not really. I couldn't afford one. I made one." He said, "Okay, how'd you make it?" I said, "Well, I took 2 pieces of plywood." He said, "How thick was the plywood?" I said, "It was 3/8." I said, "Put them on an angle." And then I took the mud flap off my bicycle and I used that as the reflective surface, and I cut it into a square and I nailed it onto the board. And he said, "Okay, that's pretty good." He said, "You're actually lucky that you don't have a real practice pad. Those things are for wussies." He said, "Here's what I want you to do." He says, "Forget the practice pad. I want you to start working on a pillow." And I went, "A pillow? That won't work." And he said, "Exactly. That's why you're going to do it this way." And then he said, "Let me see you. Let me just see you play on your lap." So, like I went like this a little bit, and he went, "That's no good." He said, "Your sticks are moving about 6 inches. I want to see your sticks move 12 to 14. He said, "What size sticks do you use?" I said, 7A or 7B, whatever. He says, "Stop." He says, "Use 2B from now on." He says, "When you play live, you can use those lighter sticks, but use 2B all the time. Go 12 to 14, use a pillow." And anyway, I won't go on and on into the minutia, but it was like, what? I never, I didn't hear these things before. This was the first time in my life. I went home and I just woodshedded. Then I stumbled upon another drummer, because I used to show up at live shows and just kind of hang around and try to observe the drummer. That was what I did when I was 14. And met this guy named Steve Wilson. I'm sure he doesn't remember me. But anyway, I hung around till after they finished playing. And it turned out he came from the De La Salle Drum Corps as well. So he was sort of, if not a protege of Skip's, he came from the same lineage. And he sort of reinforced all the Skip stuff. I got to thank Skip at Metalworks. Finally, before he died, when he was in his early 70s, he was there and I told him the story. And of course, when I was a kid, I never had the nerve to walk up to him. How I got the lesson was he saw me writing crib notes. I was standing beside the stage and I had a little booklet and I was writing stuff down while he was playing. And when he played the last song, he came over and he put his hand on my shoulder and he jokingly said, "Hey kid, what are you doing?" And he tried to scare me, and he did. And I said, he said, "Let me see that." And he grabbed my book and he says, "This is gibberish." And I said, I don't know how to write music. It's my way of doing it." And he said, "Come on over here. I'm going to show you how to play drums." And he brought me into the dressing room with Danny Gerard and Chuck Mitchell and, the rest of the guys in the Poppers, and literally gave me the lesson in the 30-minute break between 2 sets of the Poppers. So the truth is stranger than fiction sometimes,
Thanks for sharing that. And Skip was a guy, people will pay attention to Bob McBride. Well, here's the lead singer guy, but I mean, Skip was back there singing too. And of course you did that. By the way, I always loved your voice. I always loved your voice. You had a sharpness to your voice that I really, really liked. And as a drummer, but I couldn't sing. Chase sings, but he doesn't want to sing. That's like a rite of passage for when you get people like that. Phil Collins, there's so many drummers who sing. Who were your influence? Was Skip an influence like that as far as a singer?
No, because I always considered Skip a drummer. Like I know he sung, but it's like it's like he was just such a master on the drum kit that I couldn't even think about anything. He was a good songwriter, he was a good singer, but he was a master, on the drum set. And that was how that was the bead that I was on at that stage in my life.
Okay, Mr. Gilmore, what are you going to do with all that stuff you have in the warehouse? I saw that documentary, and I remember seeing Randy Bachman's. I'm going, that's a lot of guitars. I asked Steve Lukather, and I've talked to Steve so many times. I follow Toto a lot. And I asked him, and he's got this stuff right in the back of him. It's everywhere. Nothing like this. That's just autographed albums from 39 years. But I said, what are you going to do with your stuff? And artists always know, oh, my stuff. I'm not. Steve Lukather said, I'm not getting rid of my stuff. My son, Trev can sell it or whatever. What's the plan? Because I thought Thunder 7 stuff and all kinds. I'm going, my God, that stuff's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, well, I didn't collect it because I thought it was worth a lot of money. I mean, when you collect it, it's worth nothing, kind of. It's just a habit, and Mike and Rick used to tease me about all the stuff that I collected. And the crew, they would be like, okay, we need an extra tractor trailer for Gil because he's got to bring back all this stuff that he collects on the road. But, I just thought, like t-shirt designs, I would be like, are you kidding me? Like, this tour, there's like 10 t-shirt designs. I don't want to never have any. So like, put it, a dozen of each design or whatever into a flight case and all this kind of stuff that just, I collected. And then there was stuff for the environment. We'd have like scrap records, and what are you going to do with those things? Bury them and pollute the earth? So I'd be like, I don't know, let's store them. We'll figure out a way. One year when I was, when the band first started, I actually gave away Triumph singles to kids on Halloween that knocked on my door. And our very first single, Hobo, which now is really a rare piece of vinyl. But I had these things, and I every kid that came around to my front door, I gave him a single. And it's funny because the story has been going on all these years. I hear about stories about, I knew some friend of mine who grew up in your neighborhood, and he says that he got a vinyl record when he was going around collecting UNICEF and candy, and he got UNICEF and he got candy, but then he got a vinyl record. Is that a true story? And yeah, it's actually a true story.
Bobby Curtola.
Well, I don't know. I'm a collector.
Well, Bobby Curtola lived in Rio Terrace in Edmonton, and he lived near my ex-wife, and she still tells the story now. She says Bobby Curtola used to give out singles. She says luckily half the kids were really happy about it because it was really neat. They had enough candy, man. They were going out of. But they were going, hey, I got a 45. And Lynn told me, she says, the biggest story she's heard of a lot of those kids, that was their first 45.
Yeah. Yeah, I got the same reaction. The kids went crazy, for the 45.
When you were watching the documentary or going through this process, I mean, I was asked Rick this story, and was there, Gil, a point for you where you're going, yeah, we did that? Like, because we're always reinventing, and there's always that thing that everybody has. I mean, I'm a bottom feeder of entertainment. I'm in radio, but with artists that I talk to, we hear this, oh my God, I guess I did do that. I mean, how was it looking? I mean, with re-releases and box sets, which I love all this stuff, and fans eat it up because they don't get a lot of, that kind of music is not being made as much anymore. What was it like for you going through the process?
Well, it was, to me, it was a separate lifetime because, I had a lifetime, in elementary school and high school playing hockey, playing football, playing golf, kind of being focused on sports, mainly hockey. And then I had a lifetime, in music, but I also was very interested in audio and lighting and technology. Even before Triumph started, that's what I was doing. That was my, kind of interest, which I've returned to, with Metalworks. And now with Metalworks, we're into software development and, into the next generation of certain presentation techniques and things. So it's still a continuation of that interest that I had, as a kid and, 14 years old in grade 9, it's kind of gone back to that. When I look at the movie, to answer your question specifically, it is like looking, back through the looking glass and, rewinding a video and going, yep, that really happened. Yeah. You see all this stuff and you're so conditioned to failure. Like all bands, start in the ditch, and then it's a case of, can you get out of the ditch, which most bands don't. Most bands just, fall apart and, have trouble getting jobs and never get out of Joe's Bar if they're even lucky enough to get into Joe's Bar. And then that's the musician's life. So my early bands, same thing, hard time getting a job. A lot of the bar owners or the dance promoters or whatever be, his band is not that good. So you get conditioned to that slap in the face that, you're probably not going to make it. You guys aren't really that good. So when you actually watch back a movie like this and you see, okay, somehow we went from, and we used to tease each other about who had a worse band before Triumph, and it was like this, and who had the stupidest name. I had stupid names for my bands. Rick and I concluded that Mike was the best. He was the most successful before Triumph started, because at least he could get jobs for his band and they could afford suits that matched. So he was definitely a notch above, where I was with Rick, where we were having a hard time getting jobs and we had stupid names. Like he had a band called General Mud, which I teased him about mercilessly. And I had a band, called Abernathy Shagnaster, which they teased me about mercilessly. So
too many syllables, man. Too many syllables.
Yeah, too many syllables. So when you get these guys and they come together and we go, okay, now we're Triumph and it's the three of us and we have our collective experiences. And then we go on stage. And the first time we go on stage in 1975, from the outset, we played song number 1 and the audience was like, whoa, like this coming out the stage. It was like, what? So we come off after the first set and look at each other like, what just happened? Like, I've never experienced that. Have you? No, we're not used to success. We're used to failure. And that just never stopped. That was a wheel that kept on turning. And then once we realized it was real, we went, well, whatever caused it, we may never know. It's one of those things like, what causes this, but we're going to ride this bike as far as this trail goes.
This is a question I ask a lot of people. I kept asking it. I have to preface this. I kept asking it because of the interesting answers I got from people. Okay, Gil, you're in the dentist's office, and the guy next to you doesn't ask you what you're in for. He knows what you're in for, well, roughly. And he looks at you and he says, "So what do you do?" And of course, what do you say?
I generally just say I'm a musician.
But then, okay, have you done anything that I would know? So
I don't do that. No. If he recognizes me, like I'll talk to him about Triumph, but I don't volunteer the information.
Yeah, because it changes the energy in the room, and then the conversation's this long. You don't have this long.
Yeah.
When I saw you guys first at St. Clair Rink in Newcastle, which is now Miramichi, Northeast New Brunswick. I think you were with Earl's band. What's his name? Buzz Shearman.
Oxy.
Yeah, I think that was the
Oxy.
I'm collecting, and it's a real obscure. You might not remember, but you have any memories of being in Miramichi or Newcastle?
I'll tell you this: the East Coast of Canada, like to me, it's a bit of a blur as far as all of the shows that we play down there. But I got to tell you, just absolutely love that part of the country. Just love it. And we played so many concerts. We were playing 100 concerts a year. So they all you do remember generally what happened. You don't remember sort of specifically. There's just too many of them. But you do get a flavor. So the thing to me, I always enjoyed, tertiary markets in nice areas. I really, really enjoyed it. So I was more inclined to like playing areas where, where arenas were smaller and they may compromise our production a little bit, but we were just in this wonderful environment, because there's only so many Chicagos and New Yorks and LAs and Philadelphias and so on. And you go into those big markets, or even the big, I'll call them rock markets, your Cleveland, your Detroit, those sorts of markets, and there's like a different energy level, so it takes more out of you. So if you're playing someplace like Michigan's a great example. Like if you go to play Detroit, and you're in Joe Louis Arena, and you feel like the media's on you, and there's radio interviews to do, and there's all this blah, 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 blah. But if you go play Battle Creek, and you go play Grand Rapids, and you go play Kalamazoo, which we did, we played those like great arenas in all three. Saginaw, great arena in Saginaw, and but everything's just a little smaller. There's one radio station, there's maybe one newspaper, there's less intensity in the trying to get the car in and out of the venue, just the number of people kind of hitting on you. And it's a little more relaxed. Even our crew, I would always find, sometimes the catering would be regional and more home cooked food for our crew. And, the whole thing was just like, man, this is cool. If we never play another major market again, this is great. Just let's play secondary markets forever. So I like the mix of the big cities, less of them and more of the of smaller cities where there's a bit more of a home, a homespun feel.
Well, I'm not sure if I was trying to find it's on YouTube. But I think Mike had told me that when you guys were looking at Rick, that somehow there was something about Rick or his genre or I don't know, that you weren't convinced as much as he was. Is that a correct story?
I don't think that is correct. I mean, Mike plays guitar, so he has a better initial, I think, first impression of guitar players. Or maybe a little bit different criteria than I would have, because I don't play guitar. So, but we were both very fired up on Rick when we first played with him. I thought he was a great guitar player when I first saw him. I thought he was a great guitar player the last note we played on stage. He's still a great guitar player. In fact, I've told him many times that he plays better now than he's ever played in his life. Like, he has kept his chops up, but he's also layered on and layered on and layered on. And he's a master guitar player. He really is.
What about, I really enjoyed Sebastian Bach in the doc. I mean, he was like channeling like every great, I mean, I was such a Triumph fan myself growing up. I just loved everything you guys put out. But and I remember seeing you guys, just as an aside, I remember seeing you guys at Northlands Coliseum the second time I saw you guys. And I felt teary-eyed because the show was so much bigger. And I'm going, they made it big, just as an aside, I thought. But Sebastian Bach, oh my God, you couldn't help but smile every time he was on screen. You're going, I get it, man.
Yeah, I think Sebastian and the trailer, I don't know who was the star of the film. It definitely wasn't Triumph. It could have been Sebastian. It might have been the Trailer Park Boys. They were pretty awesome. It was, and maybe the real star is the director, because, the directors, I should say, because Sam and Mark, they did a phenomenal job. I mean, Don Allen and Peter Goddard got this story rolling initially, and then it went from Revolver over to Banger Films, and the collaboration there was terrific. And wow, what Mark Riccardelli did in the edit bay is unbelievable. Like how to get those pieces, like you're talking about, like the stuff that Sebastian did, which was wild, and you got the Trailer Park. How do you make that and make the story make any sense? But he did.
It also, to me, showed the fact that I just rewatched it last night. uh, it showed me that there was just so many different facets and different types of people. You talk about San Antonio, getting there, and all of a sudden it gets big, and then you think, "Wow, we're lucky to be here. This is great. Radio station likes us." Then keeps getting bigger and bigger, and I mean, I always ask people, and I stop asking rockers that say, "Oh, do you ever think you'd be here?" Because it's so generic question. They go, "No, when we're in our 20s, like you referenced a while ago about being thankful for things. When you're in your 20s, you're stuck in being. You can't think of being 50 or 60. It's an abstract thought. I mean, why would you do that, right? So you're just riding the wave.
Yeah, we weren't thankful. It's just kind of like we were talking about my parents. You're not smart enough, or you're not old enough to be thankful. I mean, I'm not going to say that we weren't. We were grateful to our fans, I think, from day one. But you convince yourself, as you start to see that Ferris wheel start to turn, that it's gonna, it's just gonna go, and it's gonna go, and it's gonna go, and it's more like I think it's more like a sports team where you win the pennant one year and you just double down like Tom Brady, and you go, you know what, I'm just going to win it next year. So it's that determination to keep going and to conquer more territories, get more fans, and I don't know, is that not grateful, or is it? I don't know what it is exactly. It's the mindset of a 20-year-old musician who's on a roll.
I'm not going to go through all the albums, so don't worry. But going into the first album, there's that cliche people talk about. The biggest one I remember hearing, "You Can Go Gold and Ride the Bus in Canada." That was a big one because they used to syndicate a cross Canada report show. And I talk to all these artists and I go, "Wow, this is the greatest." And they kind of teach me that you can still go gold and it's not everything. But for you guys, that's another thing. For you guys, going into the first album, you have your whole life up to that point, your whole life experience, whether it's music or not, to put into that first album to get it done. I know from the documentary, you guys were worried about having enough songs, but and then you go into the second album and you've got this much time. But what was the vibe like? Were you guys just, what were you thinking going into recording that first album?
Well, the first album's pure excitement because, it was so hard to get into a recording studio. There were so few of them and they were so expensive. And, you had to have a record company that would pick up the tab to do it. And so you just felt like you were Alice in Wonderland, I think, when you went into that your eyes were the size of apple pies because, here I am, I'm in a recording studio. This is where, the big musicians are, not me. I don't deserve to be here. It's that kind of, we're not worthy kind of feeling, and then you start and you hear yourself for the first time with a real recording engineer and things like that. And wow, it's a really exciting experience. The most amazing thing though is when that record comes out, and I remember the very, very first time I heard Triumph on the radio, and it was just like, that was a magic feeling when we were going to a gig and I had my radio on, and I knew sooner or later I was going to hear a song, so I'd heard they were starting to play the record, and then a song came on and I just cranked it up and I went, wow, that's I never thought I'd have a band that would be on the radio.
By the way, classy move to ask Steve Wozniak to introduce you guys at the US Festival.
Did you say how did that happen?
Well, although I thought that was a very classy move that you came up to him, and you basically, I remember that kind of tugged me a little bit. I remember going, that's an arduous thing to put one of those machines together with so many moving parts, right? And he was like a kid, you brought him right back to why he does what he does, I mean, beyond the computer stuff, but that was a nice moment, man.
Well, thanks. Well, the backstory on that was, so, the Clash were making these comments. Like, I met Steve early on and I knew what kind of heart he had. And he has a heart as big as All Outdoors. He has a heart as big as the US Festival. And he, the Clash sort of took advantage of this as making false statements about him that just made me disgusted. And they were kind of coming down the road of, oh, this guy's a corporate pig, he's blah 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 blah, just bad mouthing him for absolutely no reason. The truth of the matter is, Steve is like, and he's been a lifelong friend. He's still my pal. Steve's like a big kid. He threw a party. He didn't do it to make money. He lost a fortune. Like there's no way he could make money. He built the facility basically from at Glen Helen Park, like moved with earth graders and all this kind of stuff. And he spent a fortune on all the bands and so on and so forth. They didn't control the security that well, so it was impossible. There were so many people there. A lot of people got in for free. He had this idea that and it's really interesting that we're in this horrible mess right now with Russia killing so many people in Ukraine, that his idea at the time was to try to engage, kind of the world inside that's why there was 3 days and they were different genres of music, and pull everybody together. And he particularly had his eye on Russia, because he felt like, if we can bring America and Russia together through music. And he had one of those Steve Wozniak, and I can't remember whether it was related to satellites, or I'm pretty sure it was satellites or something. It was in the infancy of the technology to somehow connect, the countries and make them sort of, share the music journey, if you will. I don't know that he was altogether successful with that aspect of the US Festival, but that was the vision behind it. That's what he was trying to do. And so the reason that I ended up talking to him saying, like, you've done a great thing here, and these guys bad mouthing you from the Clash, should take 2 weeks off and then quit. These guys are jerks. And I said, I won't hear about it. I said, I'll talk to the press and I'll tell them the truth. So that's how we kind of bonded a little bit. And that's why I said, hey, come on stage and introduce us, because, I think you're a great guy, and I'm not listening to this garbage that's being spun for their own purposes.
Metalworks. When did you know this machine that you built, this whole other life, which you would have been known for anyway by itself, right? When did you know this was going to take off? Did it take off from the beginning? Were there defining moments?
No, it was a build. I love technology, and the first studio at Metalworks. There were two engineers that were involved in the design of the studio and the electrical build and so on. But I was the band member that was involved in it, because I was involved in, sound, lighting, that sort of technology. So I was a bit of a geek. And so I got involved in the construction of the very first studio. But no, it started as Metalworks started as a private studio that was just for Triumph and some of our friends. So, Tom Cochran recorded there. Our engineer, if he wanted to bring somebody in that, he was friends with or whatever, there was some of that going on. But initially it was just a private studio. But it was really after, Triumph stopped recording, and I sort of turned it into a commercial studio and started building more studios. So we got it up to where we had 6 studios running. Now with our school, we have 9 studios, but it grew over time.
The Le Studio thing, you're a studio guy, so like that's not really being rebuilt, right? I mean, as far as I know, that I keep seeing videos of this famous studio, and it's basically still like it looks like it's in a war-torn area of the world. Have you heard anything about that?
I missed the first part of the question.
Le Studio, where people are saying they're going to rebuild it, but that's been being said for like 10 years now. In Morin Heights, there's people.
No, I don't think that's a true story, but it could be.
Okay, but
the studio at Morin Heights was a great studio. Like Andre Perry was a great studio man, and interestingly, so Morin Heights had the first SSL console in Canada. And the reason I know that is because I bought the sound. So, he recorded some great albums up there. Different engineers, of course, different producers, but Morin Heights turned out some amazing records.
highest point, lowest point of being Triumph? What was the, like, was it the US Festival? What was it for you? What was the defining moment for you being in the band? What was the most challenging?
I think the high point was being able to have my mom and dad come to, Maple Leaf Gardens, and, with in a limo with a security guard, and get walked out to their seats and sit and watch, because my mom and dad had big families, and they were great. My aunts were phenomenal. They treated me like gold on both sides, my uncles too. But I had one aunt on my dad's side who was a teacher, and sometimes in the evening he would talk to her, and we loved her. My Aunt Isla, she was amazing, but she would always say, well, Herb, what's Gil going to do once he stops with this music stuff? And she was from the old school. There was, I don't think she, maybe aside from, Lawrence Welk, I don't know that she even knew who the Beatles were. I don't think she thought there was even a business or any kind of career to be had in music. So she would, Herb, what's Guilford going to do when he stops with this music? And, what's he really going to do? And that kind of, I think, it hurt him a little bit to hear that. And so, but he had a lot of faith, and he was a great coach in business and so on. So I think, when he could actually, when the success was tangible, and he could see it and feel it and touch it, I think that was a highlight for me, is just seeing my dad happy and my mom happy, and realizing that that I wasn't a deadbeat, or that I hadn't messed up somehow. So that was really it. As far as low points go, well, I don't know. That's a good one. I guess the low point would be, when we had bad times with Rick. Yeah, I guess that would be the low point. But even then, I don't know. I never lost faith in thinking that it would come around. And I talked to, I was very good friends with Rick's brother, his late brother, and we talked all during that period, and we remained very good friends. And Russell was very influential, actually, in getting Rick kind of to let go of some feelings, and reunite with Mike and I. And I also stayed friends with Rick's wife, Jeanette. I talked to her a few times, and I just thought, well, sooner or later, we'll get going again. I just felt that we had too many good times and too much in common. But when bands break up, there's going to be hurt feelings. There's a lot of money involved at that stage of the game, and a lot of reputational stuff. So it's not easy. Families have fights. We know what family fights are like, but a professional fight, when it's in front of the public, is that much more difficult. I mean, thank God we resolved everything. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be with Mike and Rick tomorrow. We're shooting a little video Q&A together, so it'd be great seeing them.
The Rocky Mountain Way, I remember interviewing Kenny Passarelli. I follow a lot of Elton John bandmates, and so I've interviewed a lot of them. Not Elton; he's impossible to get, but he said nice things about, because he co-wrote Rocky Mountain Way with Joe, but I asked him about your version, and he says top shelf. So
That's nice.
Well, top shelf is good.
Yeah. I always got asked the same question in reverse, and they'd say to me, well, what do you think of Joe's version? I'd say, well, I like Joe's version better than Triumph's version. They were like, really? Yeah. Why? I go figure. I like Joe Walsh. Like, I'm just, I love Joe Walsh. You're not going to tell anything that I'm involved in. If I've got somebody that, me, I looked up to him, and I love Joe Walsh's version of that. I love the way he plays guitar, and I just look at it like, it's a great song, and it's a great version, and how could anything be better? our version is different. Ours is heavier. There's no doubt about that. Ours is a little slower and a little heavier. And I guess if people are inclined to like, the sort of the more rock version of it, then perhaps those people like ours. But I'm sure tons of people feel the other way. I don't know what the ratio is. It's a great song. Like, I like both versions.
Do you still have the Rise Up for your drum kit? Where did that ever go?
Yeah, no. We actually tried to donate that to the Canadian Music Hall of Fame, but it was so big and so it took up so much real estate that we weren't able to do that. So, but ours are the sound and lighting division of Metalworks. I think they still have most of it. And I don't know that it's not really intact, but they have most of it in one of our storage trailers.
What do you think is the defining Triumph album? From your perspective as a drummer, singer, what's the one that you can walk away and say, yeah, that's got it?
Well, you know what? I mean,
not the one necessarily that sold the most.
It's hard to say when you're in a band because I don't know if most musicians are like me, but I'm always a fan of other bands. So if you ask me, like, what's the best Deep Purple album, I'd go, it's Machine Head. What's the best Led Zeppelin album? I'd say, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. They had so many that were the best. Physical Graffiti. I mean, where do you go with that? It's hard when it's your own band because you're just, you're looking in the mirror and going, it's for other people to judge, not me. I would say my own personal feeling, I guess, relates back to the recording process. And I like the way we recorded Allied Forces, like the spirit of the band, the tones that we got on that record. Some of the, just the fact that it was called Allied Forces, which was, it was a tongue-in-cheek military themed song, but really the lyric, if you read between the lines, the Allied Forces, we were referring to our fans as the Allied Forces. And so it's a song about the fans. I always felt, and I still feel, the fans are what made Triumph. I mean, it was that, again, it's back to what I said about success and failure. I had plenty of failure playing in bands before Triumph. So I know what it's like to have an audience just kind of go, and when you finally have that audience turn around and go, hey, you guys are awesome. Like, that's an amazing thing when it's one person or 10 people, but when it's thousands of people doing that. So that's the whole concept of that song. It became the title track on the album. And I think it didn't get the most airplay. I mean, of course, it's not Fight the Good Fight or Lay It on the Line or, but it does define who our fans are, I think, even to this day. And so kind of cool for that reason. We played it every night at every Triumph show ever. If I had to pick another song, so this is not the same album, but the song Rock and Roll Machine, we played that every single concert we ever played. And that song is actually, I wrote the lyrics about Rick Emmett. So it's, again, a little bit tongue in cheek, but to me, the Rock and Roll Machine on the one hand was the band, because I felt like as a three-piece, we were like a machine, right? You have these three gears and they all had to mash, otherwise the whole thing would collapse. But the lyric in the verse is about Rick playing guitar, and kind of in the same way, I guess, that the Johnny Be Good lyric about playing guitar like ringing a bell. That's kind of what I always thought of with Rick, playing behind him as a drummer. I would always look at him and I go, there he goes, man, he's playing guitar like ringing a bell.
Okay, before I let you go, we're doing a 20-part thing on the history of Canadian music, going through year by year. Every episode has 1 year, which will probably be 40 parts. But anyway, can you name me, for you, 3 defining Canadians that made a difference musically for you? Or you can use any stance on Randy Bachman gave me like 40. I don't want 40. because Randy, you wind him up and you watch him go because Randy likes to talk, right? Do you have any people you'd like to mention?
Yeah. Buzz Sherman, who passed away when he was 26. Buzz got me into my first professional band, even though it had a funny name, Sherman and Peabody. He pulled me up from the minor leagues, and I'll never forget him for that. I think Miles Goodwin, who's a very good buddy of mine, I just love his songwriting. And I mean, being in the audience when I was younger, and listen to him wail on guitar, and some of the songs that he's written, rock and roll. But Miles would tell you this: if you said, "What's Gil Moore's favorite song?" he'd say, "Rock and roll is a vicious game," and he would be absolutely right in saying that. I think as far as another Canadian band, we have to be pretty thankful to the guys in Rush that started across the border, because the hardest thing for a Canadian band is to make it south of the border. That's what I grew up what it was all about, because so many bands just get blocked at that 49th parallel, can't get over there, can't get an audience in America, so they can only grow their audience in Canada. And Rush went across that border. They went into Texas, I'm going to say 6 months before us, maybe 9 months before, just a little bit before us, but they whetted the appetite for Texas music fans. And surprisingly enough, a lot of people don't know this, but Buzz Sherman and Moxie went across the border. And if Buzz had kept the band going, and it had not had that tragic accident, I think that that the same thing might have happened with Moxie. The American audiences loved them, so they just never got a chance.
I want to thank Gil Moore for talking to us. It's always a pleasure talking to great Canadian icons on this channel, and that's what Rock History Canada is all about. Make sure you comment on our video, subscribe to our channel, and share our video. Also, like our videos. It makes a big difference in them performing. And share them on the specific groups where these videos, like a Canadian group maybe, where this video belongs. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Canada.